Good afternoon, everyone in Houston, Texas, and beyond. My name is Sharik Abdul Ghani. I am the director of Minaret Foundation, where our focus is to lift American Muslim voices for change through multi-faith and civic engagement. This may be a little confusing because Imam Walid Basuni and I were just on a few minutes earlier saying that Sheriff Gonzalez may not be able to make it because he was on the front lines. And as it turns out, he was on the front line since 3 a.m. this morning. And for those who aren't in Houston, Houston is sort of underwater at the moment. We might become an aquatic city. I don't know what's going on. If I see alligators floating past my front door, I know we're in a bad situation. But we have Sheriff Ed Gonzalez here with us today, who is running for re-election for Harris County Sheriff. Sheriff Gonzalez, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure, Sharik. Thank you so much, and a pleasure to be with you and the Minaret Foundation and all of the amazing work and everybody that might be tuning in.
Thank you. So we're gonna, as I had mentioned to you, we're gonna keep this a little short because I know you've been up since 3 in the morning. I'm sure you're getting calls and text messages right now. So we're gonna keep this to about 25 to 30 minutes. Sure. Sheriff Gonzalez, could you give us an overview of your platform?
Yes. Well, for me, number one, it's always to keep our community safe. We live in a dynamic region. The Harris County community is one of the largest in the country. It's the largest county in the state of Texas and the second largest in the entire country. We're very international, very diverse. We continue to grow. And so there's a lot of both opportunities and challenges in this region. So for me, it's always public safety. It's always to making sure that all our communities are safe. Two is to continue to be an innovative leader, thought leader in terms of how we move forward with policing to make sure that it's fair, it's constitutional, and it's transparent for everyone. That's also very critical, especially in this day and age. And then three, it's also to continue just to move the agency forward with the use of technology, with the use of developing best practices, our training as well. All of those things are things that we're always keeping an eye out for. We want to be a leader in policing. Any police agency is always in the front lines of protecting the community. It's important to all communities, and it's something that we must do, but we must also do it fairly and equitable for everyone.
Absolutely. Ed, could you tell us more about, as the sheriff of Harris County, could you identify 3 things that you've done to make Harris County a safer place?
Yes, one thing we've done, and because public safety is number one, because we're a region so big, we are going to have some element of crime like any other large city, any large metropolis. So one thing we've done is to try to make sure that we're being proactive. We've identified crimes, especially violent crimes, that we want to try to control as best we can. And so we've developed different crime reduction units that are out in the different patrol districts that we handle, so that we could be a little bit more proactive. You know, policing tends to be very reactive after something's happened, and we respond, and it's after the fact. We're trying to become more proactive and trying to be out there a little bit more visible. And so that's something that we've tried to do. We've also tried to make sure that we're developing best practices. We want to make sure that our deputies, our frontline personnel are well trained. Nowadays in policing, we have to respond to a lot of people that are struggling with addiction, with mental illness, and those type of issues. So we've made sure that now, for example, some of our trained deputies have an iPad. And so when they respond to a call with someone in crisis, they can pull up an iPad like you and I are right here, connect the person to a mental health professional, and hopefully get them the assistance that they need, a medical type of assistance. So that's being very successful. And then also, unfortunately, in our region, we have a very unsafe driving culture. We tend to drive very fast. Many people are driving distracted on cell phones and sometimes impaired. We lead the nation in terms of fatal crashes, and it's something we're trying to turn the tide. We've led in that area for a very long time. So we've developed also specialized units that can better enforce when we're seeing illegal driving activity like that, but also to educate and prevent. I'm a big believer that in any police agency, as police executives, we should have a perspective that isn't just about enforcement. We also need to be partners with the community to try to prevent, to educate, to inform. How do we protect our children? How do we keep our families safe? How do we deal with some of the issues like mental illness and crime that's occurring in our community? We're all in this together, and it really takes the entire community working together. We need strong partnerships with all communities, especially our Muslim American communities, because we know many times, unfortunately, because of hate and misinformation and ignorance, they can be targets. Their places of worship can become targets. So we all need to make sure that we're allies standing in unity against violence and hate of any kind.
You know, Sheriff Ed, it's interesting that you mentioned iPads. I sit on the police reform task force that's just recently concluding for Mayor Turner. And one of the things that we realize is that HPD officers don't even have cell phones. They don't even have HPD issued cell phones. How is it that you have HCSO iPads?
Yeah, well, what we did is we started a pilot program. I'm a big believer in technology. Obviously, it's all around us. We were just talking about technology earlier, but so it's an important force multiplier. And so we were able to start a pilot program. We started small and we've been scaling up. And so it's something that we've tried to do. It is a challenge. Technology can be very costly, but it's also very necessary. We now in a situation where many times our citizens are being impacted by identity theft. They're also at times now even skimming. When you go to a gas station and you insert your credit card, your information could be stolen. And so we need to make sure that we're trying to stay ahead of the curve. There's a lot of cyber threats that occur, a lot of threats to our children. There's many predators that are out there using social media platforms and the dark web to target children, our children. And so we've got to stay ahead of that. It's a challenge in policing. We tend to sometimes be behind technology, but we're trying to stay ahead of it.
You know, speaking of the police reform task force I was talking about, and speaking of technology, in recent days, I don't have to tell you, with the killing of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, Miss Taylor in Louisville, and I think the announcement's actually coming out today on what they're going to do with that case. You're also part, I believe, of a national organization of law enforcement professionals in terms of the chiefs. What do you believe to be the first step in healing community mistrust of law enforcement? I think you've gone on the record condemning the use of chokeholds. And after the killing of Mr. Floyd, the general public has really become more aware of the harm they cause. So what's the first step in healing community mistrust?
Yeah, well, there's a number of things I think that have to be done. But I think first, it's important for all of us, especially police leaders, to understand the moment. This is not just that individuals are upset about one particular incident. Frankly, there's been a long history of situations where especially Black men have had encounters with police officers, and unfortunately, many have become deadly situations. And so people are tired of just hearing failed promises. They want actual change. They want to make sure that bad police officers will be held accountable, that we're not afraid to condemn it when it happens, that we're not afraid to look internally and see how we could improve culture. It's important for us to understand history. And sometimes it can't only be through our perspective. We have to look at it through the lens of the other. And that's in life in general, because often, we're afraid to talk about history, and sometimes it's to our benefit and sometimes it may not. But we have to be realistic that, look, for example, with the Black community, the relationship with policing hasn't always been good since the beginning. Policing sometimes was used as a model of power and control over the community, especially during the slave era. So we have to be aware of that. Same time, we need the community to know that, policing in general, it's a very noble profession. We're here to serve and protect people. We do it successfully far many more times than we get it wrong. If you look at the millions of interactions that exist between police officers and the public, most of them go great. They work out okay. But there's going to be some that are wrong. And sometimes it could be a result of training. It could be that there was just a bad decision made on the part of the officer. And sometimes it could be something that maybe we just need to explain what the tactics were and the reason why we had to use deadly force. So I think there has to be, first, be willing to understand, and be willing to understand as well that, I guess to your point specifically, is we all need to tone down the rhetoric. And that's starting at the highest levels of government. Too often, it seems like we're pitting one group after another. We've got to be careful when we start to stereotype any one group or profession. We've seen it when there's been bans from countries, for example, traveling to the United States, and how sometimes one group can be demonized and made look like everyone is a gang member or a rapist or things like that. Those are very hurtful words, and sometimes we might all understand that it's just politics, or it's just, but sometimes people take it to heart, and we're seeing where sometimes people use misinformation or hate to carry out violence against another for whatever reason, because it's political ideology, religion based, because we may look different. And so that's where we have to start. We need to start with a more informed and more respectful dialogue. And from there, we could start from there. We could work these differences.
So as the sheriff, what have you done to gain the trust? Are you saying that you've started these dialogue sessions, these listening sessions to engage relational policing?
Yes, for us, one thing, I'm a firm believer, prior to me becoming sheriff, I also served 3 full terms as a city council member, mayor pro tem as well. So to me, I understand the need to engage and connect with the community. That's why I ran for elected office. That's why I'm a public servant, because I work for the people. I sincerely serve for the right reasons. I want to make things better for everyone. I want to use whatever talents I have for good, to help empower everyone. And I believe in that. I also believe in the diversity of our region. And so for me, it's not something that I'm just starting now. The best time to engage is not when there's an emergency or a time of crisis. Sure. It's to make sure that we're engaging before. That's why whenever there's, for example, a threat on a mosque or on the Muslim community, for example, we're proactively working with the different imams and everybody so that we could make sure that we're providing added controls in those areas. I've been to different mosques as well. I've been involved with prayers. I've been involved being present to try to build those relationships. We're a big county, 1,700 square miles, but we believe in building. People want to get to know their police officers, not when they need them, not when the emergency has occurred, but when they're not needed, when it's before, when it's relationship building. And we also need to build trust, because everyone wants a safe community, and we need the community to know that they can reach out to us as their partners, as their public servants, to help protect them, protect other places of worship, their children, making sure that we're not contributing to the hate that exists.
Rolling back just a little bit, you're talking about officers ensuring that they have access to training, they have access to the people, and as well as mentioning that they put themselves in harm's way. Chief Acevedo has gone on record multiple times saying that one of his accomplishments has been rooting out the bad apples in HPD, and he said the word bad apples multiple times in the media and in conversations with faith leaders and community leaders. Sheriff Ed, do you feel that there could be bad apples in the sheriff's office? What have you done to root out the bad apples? And what are you doing in the future to ensure that the Harris County Sheriff's Office not just maintains its diversity, but maintains a diverse outlook?
Yes, I've heard the term many times. There's always going to be a few bad apples in any profession, and I certainly agree with the principle of that. But I also counter that, unfortunately or fortunately, in our profession, we can't afford to even have one bad apple, right, because it could be someone's life. People depend on us. We've got to make sure that we're being very responsible, because the law, the community affords us a great deal of power. We have a lot of power over the community in the sense that we can legally take someone's life if we act within certain guidelines. So we need to make sure that that power that's given to us, that we use it responsibly, that we don't use it as a tool to oppress people, to do illegal arrests, those type of things. So we need to make sure that we're held to the highest standard. The community doesn't always have such a standard for itself, and they're not required to, but we're the trained professionals. So it means that when you take on this job, when you decide to suit up, when you take that oath of office, you're here to serve and protect, to be a peace officer. And sometimes I think we forget that calling of being a peace officer. We think about law enforcement. People see us when we enforce things, but not there to try to prevent and to be a friend to the community. So I'm very proud of our agency. I think we've come a long way historically. I think that we're much better trained now. We go to great lengths to make sure that we treat and train up on de-escalation. We now have programs to assist communities, for example, that may have a loved one that has autism. We have a lot of other programs that I hadn't touched on yet related to mental illness. So we're much more focused on trying to be part of the solution. But at the same time, look, it's going to happen. We're still human beings, and we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes of something went bad in a quick moment. And we can't crucify every officer when something happened. They acted in good faith, and they can explain and defend their actions. At the same time, when they do something wrong, we must hold them accountable. So I too have had to use my authority as sheriff to terminate people that didn't do their job properly or what was expected of them. And that's always a tough decision because it's someone's career, but that's why they have to know when they sign up what the expectations are and that they're going to be held accountable. We all are held accountable. No one's above the law. And so that's something that we have to continue to do. As I mentioned earlier, we have to improve our training. We have to improve our policies to make sure they're keeping up with case law as well as what's best for the community. And just because we may legally be entitled to use some type of force, it doesn't mean that it's the right decision to make at that time. We should always try to preserve and protect life all the time, so whether it be ourselves, because I want our deputies to go home to their families, whether it's a community member that's a potential victim, and even the person that's being accused of committing a crime or is acting out violent, we too have a responsibility to treat them in a constitutional manner.
Absolutely. In the United States, almost half of adults will experience a mental illness during their lifetime. These adults are also more at risk in regards to issues when it comes to policing. What would your first step be to ensure, or what have you done to ensure that those with mental illness are not unfairly targeted or treated inappropriately?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that we have to reduce the stigma of mental illness. I think many times there's a belief that, you know, when we see somebody or we encounter someone, say, "Hey, how you doing?" Everybody instinctively says, "Hey, I'm doing good, thank you." But maybe inside they're hurting. Everybody's going through tough times. Right now, we're dealing with a pandemic. Other times it could be, job loss, a bad relationship, health issues, you name it. Somebody is always, there's a potential that something's going wrong in life, and it's tough to cope with. Our children too, and so what we did, what I first did when I first became sheriff, is I created a bureau. A bureau is like a section in my agency that's for mental illness and diversion and special projects. And what we do there is to create programs. You go to harriscountycit.org. There's a list of programs there, and it talks about the program that I mentioned with the iPads. But we also have programs where we partner a deputy with a mental health professional that respond together to calls of mental health crisis. So that way we have both perspectives. We have both the safety, but we also have somebody there that's a mental health professional, because we should really look at these issues through a public health lens. Policing, we're not mental health professionals, and we get sent out and we have limited tools. We have a gun and we have handcuffs and we have a taser. And so those aren't always the best approach to deal with somebody that's in the middle of a crisis. So we really need to rethink how we respond to those calls. We have increased our training for de-escalation. When I took over at the sheriff's office, a single digits of our workforce had training on what we call crisis intervention training. We've increased that 3 times now. Everybody that comes through our agency now has at least 40 hours of mental health training. That exceeded the state requirement at the time. So we've always been ahead of the curve when it comes to dealing with these issues. We're also providing at the jail medically assisted treatment, which means that we're able to have our physicians work with individuals that have an addiction so that we could try to curb the appetite for the drugs, and we partner them with a counselor so that hopefully we could reduce that recidivism. They can restore their life, be productive, and they're also not returning back to jail or committing crimes. Back to my focus being public safety. To us, if we can help get somebody back on track, then it keeps them from committing more crimes. So the community saves more money, and at the same time, we're keeping the community safe. So we're tackling addiction and mental illness in a lot of different ways. When I was on city council, the project that I worked on that I was most proud of was leading the effort to create the Houston Recovery Center, which is a facility where we could divert individuals that have some type of drinking problem or whatever. We could divert them, let them get the help that they need, and not necessarily criminalize the behavior, because too often, especially in this country, we only incarcerate people like punishment, but we never try to seek to really help. And I'm of the belief that unless we're really intervening and helping correct the issue, the root cause, and it just keeps repeating itself over and over and over, and it's very costly. We need those dollars to better provide resources out in the community, better education, better healthcare, all these other issues that cost money. But because we're just incarcerating people without providing solutions, then we're really not being effective.
Have you found that you've been able to make significant progress as your time as sheriff?
Oh, very much so. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, we have trying to become an agency. Before I came on, we were not very, the sheriff's office was not very connected in terms of data and performance measures and all that. We're trying to now move in that direction, you know, from a business perspective, to develop key performance indicators, KPIs, so that we can have the metrics to see if we're being successful. When I came into the sheriff's office 3.5 years ago, the sheriff's office was $8 million in a deficit. In every budget that I've managed as sheriff, we've come in under budget, so we know how to run a good operation. We've made sure that we're also taking care of our own personnel. For us, like any business leader, any police executive, our personnel are our most prized possession, because they're the ones that get the job done every day. We've launched a psychological unit now, a mental health wellness unit, because it's important. We have a very stressful job, like you said earlier. I've been up since 3 in the morning out monitoring the weather event that we have here locally. During Harvey, I helped out with rescues, like many of my teammates. That could be very difficult. We see death on a daily basis. We see a lot of bad stuff, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of the mental health and stress of our personnel, so that when they're out there, they too are making better decisions, not only professionally when they interact with the public, but also at home. Because if they're going through a difficult time, that's going to sometimes carry out with their performance. So we want to make sure that we're better protecting our own police officers and their families, as well as our personnel. So, you know, we're tackling a lot of different things to make our agency better, and in return to serve the community better as well. Because at the end of the day, I serve the people, and I need to make sure that as their representative, that I'm always looking to see how we could do better and how I can do better. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm learning every day and trying to improve and to serve better.
And just to change gears a little bit, for the sake of time as well, because I know that you have to get back out to the community because of the flooding. And for those who are just tuning in, we're here interviewing Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, who's running for re-election in Harris County. Sir, but specifically about school and education. Now, while I understand that you're not a teacher, or you may be a teacher to your officers, but you know, education may not be your direct focus, but there is something called the school to prison pipeline. which is very passionate, something very passionate to our organization, and something that's growing in our community as well. Children specifically of color have fallen victim to unequal policing sometimes, especially within the educational system, disciplinary policies in schools, but also when they get picked up outside of the school system, whether they be detained and taken to juvenile. What are some things that you believe that the sheriff's office can do or has done under your leadership to possibly thwart the entry of our children in this school to prison pipeline?
That's a great question, and one that I'm actually very passionate about. And I do actually see a strong connection, as you do, between the criminal justice system and our education system. And I'll first begin. My passion for education first started when I was about 6 years old, because I had one of the most impactful findings in my life, which was that my father couldn't read and write. And so to me, I saw by having to help him read job applications and food menus and other things about the importance of having education. That's something that they instilled in me. I was the first in my family to go on to college. I got not only an undergraduate degree, but also a master's degree as well. So it's something, again, I mentioned earlier that I'm a lifelong learner. As sheriff, I've seen firsthand where many in our jail population are illiterate. Sometimes as high as 60% can't truly read or write. So I see that when children start going down that path, they start becoming justice involved. So we need to break that cycle. So it's something that I've been working on dismantling the criminal prison pipeline even before I became the elected sheriff. And that's really what prompted me to get into public office, because I wanted to make a bigger difference in policy. Now, there's some real important things here that would be great discussion points down the road. When I first took over as sheriff, I did a review with Texas Children's Hospital. We did a study and we learned that every year, to your point, 90,000 children have a parent that's incarcerated in our jail. 90,000 children. And that includes children from all communities. For example, in our jail today, I have 300 individuals that identify as Muslim, and so this
300
impact
young people?
300 adults.
300
And
adults.
so they have children. So who's helping them? Who's supporting them right now? Who's supporting those families? And so I see a very strong connection. So what we did is we launched a program to better assist those families. We can't help everybody, but when we can help somebody that's incarcerated, we connect with the children to get them counseling so that they can navigate that traumatic event. Because what happens is that statistics show that if you have a parent that's incarcerated, you as a child are between 60 to 70% likely, as you know from the criminal prison pipeline, to become justice involved at some point. And so you start falling behind and then bad things start to happen. So what I'm doing today is trying to plant a seed so that someday that seed gives fruit by us reducing the number of children that are coming into our system. We try to do programming to better connect. We have almost 800 women that are incarcerated inside our jail. Many of them are mothers. And so sometimes that bond is broken early on between the children and the mother. And the other thing that many times people don't understand when we operate a jail system is we're not a prison system. These individuals haven't really been sentenced yet. So about 70% of the individuals within our jail system are going to come out. They're what we call pretrial individuals, meaning that they were arrested and they've yet to pay a bond or they've yet to come out, of the jail. But so they're not technically even guilty yet. So all these different things put a big trauma and issue inside families, especially children. And they start feeling that separation from mom and dad. They start having negative feelings because the police are the one that took mom and dad away. They start becoming disruptive in the classrooms. So actually, we have a very strong connection with education. We're also one of the largest, we have one of the largest education programs in the country. We're a partner with Houston Community College, where we try to provide like GED training and other classes. So when they do come out of our jail, hopefully they can go on and at least have a job certificate and be able to work and provide for their family. Because again, our job is to try to reduce crime in the community, and by us supporting them, then hopefully they don't reoffend anymore. And we're also helping the community, the children. We also have two HISD teachers, Houston Independent School Districts, that are assigned to our jail so that those younger individuals that are in custody, the 17-year-olds and above, perhaps we could help them either get their GED or help them get any credits that they were missing when they maybe dropped out of school or committed some mistake. So we're actually doing a lot on education. We also have a lot of jail-based programs to assist and support. So it's something that I'm very passionate about because I've seen the impacts of not having education and being a Latino male. I know that the odds would have been more likely for me to be incarcerated in our jail than to ever be an elected official and be leading the agency. So I'm very proud of that. And so again, I want to make a positive difference, especially for the children in our community.
And I have one last question before we wrap up. And it regards to something that's close to our community, specifically because of recent times. Since 2016, for whatever reason, we have seen a spike in crimes of bias crimes towards Muslims, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, recently xenophobia. We've always seen issues towards our friends in the Black and Brown community, namely the Latino community, especially as, I guess, prominent leadership in our country said very disparaging remarks about people coming over from the border. Could you tell us a little bit more about your track record of combating Islamophobia and other forms of hate in Harris County?
Yes, again, going back to my professional life, I've always been present at different events to raise either awareness, during good times or whenever something bad has occurred, related to hate crimes or anything against any community. Again, when there's been attacks or threats against, our Muslim American community, we're there to protect. We're there to denounce anyone that will speak ill or badly or hate-filled against members of the Muslim community. We have a liaison within our agency as well that helps connect. Many times, like I said, we have individuals sometimes that fall within our jail system. We have an assigned liaison that helps get them Qurans when they're asked, or that comes in and volunteers to help provide, connect to their spiritual needs and everything. And so always trying to make sure that we're being responsive to all communities, that we all stand in unity, that, Muslim Americans stand united, that we're all against evil and hatred and the lack of misunderstanding about Islam. And we have to make sure that we're standing united and against voices of hate and division. Houston, Harris County is a very diverse, it said it's the most diverse region in the country, and so many languages are spoken here. We believe in diversity, but it's something that we also have to defend and protect. It's not something that we can just speak about. We have to make sure that in practice that we're creating policies that are supportive of everyone. In the sheriff's office, even going back to my predecessor, Sheriff Adrian Garcia, for example, where he welcomed the first Sikh American, allowing him to utilize articles of faith, the late Sandy Dhaliwal, a Sikh American, to make sure that we're being tolerant and showing an example that everyone can serve in our agency, that we welcome anybody to come and be a part of our team. We are actively hiring a number of different professions within our agency. We have a full medical clinic. Many people don't know that, but we have a large operation, but we welcome a diverse community. And again, I try to always be there, whether in different community-related events that I get invited to, that celebrate the richness and diversity of all communities here in Houston, Harris County.
This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time, and of all the responses that we got from the community, they mostly revolved around issues: law and order, police reform, and diversity, which you addressed top on, as well as Islamophobia, of course. And a question that came up time and again as well is sort of unrelated to your candidacy. who writes your tweets and your Facebook posts? Is that you?
I do. I'm hands-on. I became an early adopter of social media. I believe in it. I'm a public servant. I work for you, Sharik, and everybody that might tune in. I work for you.
Messages. Are
Yeah,
you?
and it's important. It's important for me to respond directly to the community and not hide behind a team or people that do it. We also have our sheriff's office platforms, obviously, that others monitor, but my own, it's my own brand, and I want to be accessible to you, the public, to inform, to try to educate, to raise awareness, to learn, and so it's something that we do. Again, I think that these are critical times, not only the pandemic, but it's a historic year, 2020. It's an election year. I want to thank you for to always, and beyond this, just the work of the foundation, raising community engagement, involvement. It's so important, and all your followers and members to be involved, vote, become informed of the issues. All politics are local at some point. Of course, the presidency is very important, but you're more likely to interact with your sheriff out in the community or with your state representative and others. So yeah, in a good way, and it's important that you vote, because when you don't vote and other communities vote, then you're basically letting them decide who our elected representatives will be. And so it's important for all communities to be engaged, exercise your vote, and let's all be engaged and make sure that our future is better than our past.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Know that you have duties to get to, as our city is, hopefully, it's not going to get underwater again. My name is Sharik Abdul Ghani. I'm the director of Minaret Foundation, where our focus is to lift American Muslim voices for real change through multi-faith and civic engagement. We're joined today, and we're wrapping up our conversation with Sheriff Ed Gonzalez of Harris County, who is rerunning for his seat once again. Thank you for your time, sir. We really appreciate it. God bless you. And
thank you.
May God help you to protect our county in these difficult times.
Thank you so much. I'll see you again soon, I hope.